Bonjour et bienvenue au Festival international du film de Paris. Hello and welcome to the Paris International Film Festival. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by the team of A Sexplanation, directed by Alex Liu. Bonjour, Alex.
Hi.
And produced by Leonardo Neri. Hello, Leonardo.
Hi, how's it going?
It's been great. I'm so glad to have such a deep conversation with you guys. We are so—
Yes, this is so exciting.
Absolutely. There's so much we want to discuss about your documentary feature. Well, we are so glad that it's screening as our Valentine's special screening at the festival and have also an interactive conversation with the audience. So if you're watching this before February 14th, Valentine's Day, make sure to join us for also the interactive Q&A with, again, Alex and Leo, so we can answer all your questions about sex and all that goes in between. So I would love to discuss with you guys first, how did you decide to make this documentary with such a straightforward conversation about sex? How did the first time you talked about it even happen?
Yeah, I think what we were, growing up being queer, gay, it's always been this point of fury for me, anger, anger that I ever was made to feel ashamed for something that is so beautiful and joyous and lovely and really what life is, what the good parts of life are made of: connection, intimacy, vulnerability. That part I cut off for so much of my life, numbed, deadened, and I was just so angry about it, and I didn't know what to do with that anger. So a lot of my life, I went into journalism, trying to help people to understand complex ideas, science, health. But whenever I pitch things about sex, in America at least, it's kind of still very taboo, controversial. They didn't want to talk about it the way I wanted to talk about it. Using all the words, language, and getting into what is this thing we call sex. So I just started throwing things on YouTube. And through that, the idea started to come in. Well, what if we actually started to talk to the big experts, researchers, educators, and put together something that could actually exercise some of these demons I had around sexual shame growing up. And for a long time, a lot of it was just like a really sexy education video, but it was really bring Leo on board that really pushed me to be more open and vulnerable about why I was doing it, my own personal life story. And I think thanks to Leo, it's really been, it was scary at first, but it's really been something that's helped so much in terms of my own sexual discovery.
Leo, do you want to also share about that? Was it a good experience to start talking about this topic with, or was it awful and terrible and you don't want to talk about it?
It was a lovely, beautiful experience. Obviously, I'm getting to work with Alex to
likewise.
Yeah. Oh, so sweet. Too nice. No, honestly though, obviously sex is a sexy topic. So getting the opportunity to explore it in a way that's humorous and to try to embrace the awkwardness that at least in the US, we kind of always butt up against this sex being very taboo and very awkward. So getting the opportunity to lean into it and to create a narrative where we outline that it is completely okay to just be comfortable in the awkwardness, and hopefully the awkwardness will dissipate and we can learn to just embrace our sexuality and the humanity of it. It was a really fun experience to kind of not only explore it through just a societal story, but also through Alex's personal story, which is I think so meaningful and impactful. And while it is a very personal story, hopefully audiences everywhere can relate to the process of self-discovery and self-acceptance. So it was a really fun, funny journey, and it was also like a very educational journey from just a filmmaking perspective. This being my first film and Alex's first feature, it was a lot of learning, but it was a very fun process.
And I think if anything, throughout this whole festival run, we've realized that you might not be gay, you might not be queer, but everyone has something they want to come out about. And I've been just blown away about how many people have told us that they've taken that step with the people in their lives.
Yeah.
That is seriously so inspiring to hear like that your film, The Sexplanation, has actually brought these conversations and made people realize, even though they're not part of the LGBTQIA plus community, or don't even feel that they can actually relate. And it's so important, right? Because sex is important. So anyway, no transition. There is also something I want to talk about, which maybe our listeners and viewers who haven't watched A Sexplanation yet do not know, is that indeed, as you mentioned, Leo, right, there is this micromural style that Alex is actually part of the documentary. And I wondered if this is something you guys knew from the very beginning. Was it part of your vision, or did it kind of happen?
No, and Leo, you can talk about this, but he was very instrumental in pushing me to be to put myself in it, because you know, I think the why I'm doing it is much more important or much more interesting as a narrative than the what per se.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Alex is a very you know, has a very journalistic background, and I think he brought me on after he started the project, and he had all these great interviews, and I mean, hopefully everyone watches the film, he's a really good interviewer, and people really open up to him. And in the background, when we were discussing why he decided to make this film, it came from such a personal place. So I think it kind of it was, on one hand, a gradual evolution to kind of showcase his personal story, but then once we realized that we have to decide to tell the audience why Alex is telling the story, it became very like apparent that his personal story was central to why the audience should care, and hopefully they do care.
Yeah. Once we put that in, the narrative started clicking right away, and the interview started making sense as a story rather than a interesting set of interviews. So once we kind of unlocked that, the process really took off from there. Yeah.
And so, Leo, you mentioned how amazing Alex is about interviewing, and this is true, by the way, Alex. Like,
Yeah.
it's really.
Thanks. I don't feel that way, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
You're amazing.
It's always, it can be awkward, right, to talk about sex, and also like, not just because you ask the person a question, but like, I don't want to spoil the movie, but there is also this amazing scene where you're actually having this conversation with your parents.
Yeah.
And then people you don't know, and you're like,
yeah.
you talk about like personal things, but also things that also unite us as a community. And people are filmed, right? That's the whole problem also about it, is that they have to feel very comfortable. So also, Leo, you mentioned you were brought on board on the project at a later stage. So how did it kind of all gel? Because I think I remember you filmed a little bit before the pandemic. Is that correct?
I think we filmed most of it before the pandemic.
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the project was like a 6-7 year project. So I think I came on board maybe about a year into it. And I kind of, you know, I always knew about the project. So I was aware of the general direction of where Alex was going. But yeah, there was still plenty of work to be done a year in on a 6-7 year project. Yeah.
So how, like, during the interviews, I bet the choice of interviewers was very large. There was
Yes.
wanted to have involved. How was the reaction to both of you, you know, when you've like contacted them? Was it easy? Like, would the interviewees be very open to talk about sex, or were some more difficult to get? We want to know all the juicy stories.
Yeah, some were. I mean, a lot of these scientists were much more ready to talk about it, because they're starved for money, any attention they can get, because you know, it's sad how much we spend. You know, sex is what creates us. It's what we spend so much of our waking life thinking about how important it is, but there's like zero money in sex research. And so they're willing to sit in front of a camera anytime, because They need the attention. They need to explain why this research is important. And they've already kind of blown up their scientific careers by studying sex in the first place. So they've already gone through that trial by fire of the taboo of sex. The people that are more difficult were like the Catholic priest, getting a Catholic priest to sit down with us to talk about it, because for good reason, he was very nervous how we would portray him. Talking to Pornhub for good reason. It was very difficult to get them to understand that we're not, we're not looking at their business practices. We're just looking at the data they have, and so getting some of the more culturally controversial, taboo interview subjects were a lot more difficult. Pornhub took like 2 years for us to land. So it ran the gamut.
Leo, do you want to share anything about that, or like how did you work in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from a filmmaking standpoint. I mean, I think Alex pretty much outlined it, but to Alex's credit, and it takes a lot of effort to warm up your subjects so that they feel comfortable and they have a rapport with you to share information freely. So, it did start off with a lot of the interview subjects, just kind of getting them on board with the message of the film. And I think we found most interviews that we wanted to get, we did, I think we were able to land. The more personal there was so much stuff that we didn't even get to showcase in the film. I mean, this is what you see in the film is only a percentage of the interviews that we have, and there are sadly so many other more personal stories that are very intimate that we just didn't have space for, because we didn't have enough enough time to give it the proper attention. But it is kind of amazing. I think people see the necessity to talk about these things more openly, and it was honestly a privilege to get people to share their stories and share their truths. Unfortunately, a lot of it couldn't be showcased, but sex is obviously a touchy subject, but people do tend to open up when they see that there is a reason to back being honest and open.
We can definitely feel that there was like this tension from the film, which is really positive. It's actually to break the barrier, right? To make people more aware, but also just more willing to communicate about sex or their practices, or just to be more open. Did you also, obviously as a documentarian, we all have like those struggles we need to figure out on the way. Along the documentary, did you struggle sometimes, or how did it work to find the right tone? Maybe at the beginning you thought it would be slightly more serious, and then like how did you kind of manage that?
I think Leo is a great barometer in terms of making sure we strike the right tone. I think at the beginning I took a much more angry approach, kind of how I was talking at the beginning, how I was so angry, and I let that kind of color the beginning. But I think it became very clear very quickly that what I'm asking the audience to do is to love and accept other people, myself included, for who we are as sexual beings. But if I'm not willing to extend that same, graciousness, if I'm not able to extend that same love, if I'm just coming out with anger, it didn't work. It doesn't work. It becomes just pardon the pun, a masturbatory kind of exercise, just about me. And so I think what Leo is great at, and I'm just gonna sing his praises there, is balancing that when you get really tender, because there are some parts of the film where I talk about my suicidal ideation, when I talk about these things that are very dark, but threading through that warmth and love and humor and light, what good sex is, like the best sex, it's full of laughter and love, and it might be weird and awkward, but it's kind of the beauty of it. And so we wanted that to really shine through the movie, and so weaving through kind of changes in tone, focusing on the light and the humor, I think was something that ended up serving the film really, really well.
I think Alex is being way too generous with giving me way too much credit. But we did kind of. No, we did. I think he brought me on because our general sensibilities and senses of humors really do mesh well. And, just to bring levity to such a dark subject was, it was a fun creative exercise. And also, it was in service to getting the audience to hopefully be receptive and open up to the message of the film.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched it yet, there's tons of sex puns that people don't catch the first way. Really pay attention. We spent a lot of time crafting a lot of sexual innuendo in all the lines. So, so please keep an ear out. Yeah.
Sometimes heavy-handed, sometimes a little less heavy-handed.
I think you did it beautifully, and it really shows that the tone and the balance is throughout. I remember, obviously, I loved the film when I watched it, and I was wondering at the beginning of the film if the tone would set across the whole film, and it really did. And I loved that because I loved that positive and just straightforward talk about sex, and I was excited to see it kept going on. It didn't really feel like it didn't work in the middle. It was really throughout the whole film.
Oh, thank you. That means so much.
Really, which is so important, and it definitely shows all you guys work on like that balance to maintain that very positive tone. Well, actually, at the festival, both in the audience and the filmmakers, we have a lot of female identifiers. So a question I have for you guys who are not female identifiers is how much have you managed, you think, to include that gaze? Like, do you consider there is a certain gaze, or do you consider that no, the way you did it was really to speak to literally anyone?
I would say we tried to be anyone. I mean, one thing that we did work really hard on is making sure the people behind the camera were very diverse. So part of it was you beg your friends and you find the people so closest. So we have a lot of queer creative friends, so they were able to be on camera. But we made a lot of effort to make sure that we had different, ethnic backgrounds, gender backgrounds, all of that, and getting their input, especially people who feel like they've been marginalized when it comes to their own sexual preferences, sexuality, who can relate to that sense of shame. I think that was kind of the main kind of creative criteria we had when we picked the people behind the camera. And so hopefully we're able to create something that a lot of people can resonate with, because whether it's shots that brought us back to being 13 years old and being silly and goofy and, making fun of balls or testicles or whatever it is, or, very intimate moments where the shame is kind of palpable in the room. Hopefully what we're able to do is bring that to light and make a little bit of a shift from what you are used to seeing when it comes to these types of films.
Yeah, in terms of making content for present day audiences, it's kind of even interesting to see how the language and culture around sex has evolved so much, even in the last 6 years. People are so much more sexually literate. The rise of Gen Z, they're so much more comfortable and more willing to question the norms that we accept in sexuality, sex and sexuality. So it's sometimes I watch the film now and I'm like, oh, just there's certain little bits of language that we use that would today would be just tweaked just a little bit. So it's kind of this, while we did make an effort to be really inclusive and be really conscious about the message that we're putting out there for everyone, it's this thing that will constantly be evolving. And if we watch it tomorrow, it'll be a completely different landscape than it was today.
I'm sure it will. Like, you did it so beautiful in your film. I'm sure it's going to have a massive impact. And talking about your crew behind the camera, probably even bigger than in a narrative feature, right? Because you guys don't specifically have cast. It's also mostly about the crew that you really pick.
Yeah.
How did it work? Like, do you consider that those diverse voices that you have behind camera is something that unfortunately we don't see enough in the industry? And how much do you think that your film and other impact films carry a responsibility to drive that through? Because right now what we realize is that sadly, we're still not quite there in terms of diversity, be it the cast or behind the camera. So how much you think impact and documentaries can have good consequences on the industry itself, so more like in reality rather than in the film?
Yeah, I think unlike a feature film, a documentary is just a lower lift, right? You know, if you have a camera and a great sound equipment, one person can film, light, shoot all of it. So there is a lower barrier to entry, and hopefully that just means that more diverse voices just are able to access the medium and be able to tell their stories. I think Ava DuVernay is a kind of like a hero of mine, and that's how she started, right? She started doing documentaries, and she said simply because it was the cheapest way to get a movie made. And I think that's the same with us. And I do think it is difficult. I'm empathetic to the idea of when you put out, we're looking for a camera person or a sound person or an editor. Most of the resumes we get are kind of straight white men for various reasons, and you do have to put in a lot more time and effort and work to really find the people who maybe haven't been able to access the industry as easily as they should have. But I think, I don't know, it's the first time I've been on a set where, for me at least, it felt a little bit more like a tribe. It didn't feel as much like a job. It felt like we were in it together to create something of real meaning. And I think, it might not pay the most, but that feeling is something that I'll never forget. And just being able to have all the diverse viewpoints, thinking through, talking about the differences we have and how that informs the work, making it just so much more richer, I think, is something that I'll always be fighting for in my career.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off that, from the storytelling perspective, I think the importance of having at least a diverse array of information or inputs is, if you are the person driving the narrative, you are going to be speaking from your vantage point, which could be limited. And, as an individual telling a story, you could have your own blind spots. So it's important to incorporate different people with different points of view. So you create a more holistic, more rich, more complete view of as close to the truth as possible. We can only get so close. And the more perspectives you have, the more complete a view. Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear how your film, Sexplanation, is having an impact on your audiences. I would love to hear what has been the impact on you. Your is about awareness and discovering yourself. So, and it sounds like it took a few years, right, to make it down. So,
yeah.
Yourself.
I mean, yeah, Leo's heard me say this before. I joke now that I've now been in so many rooms where my mom calls me a sloppy masturbator that I just don't feel like sexual shame exists for me in any way, really. That I can get in front of a room and talk about that. And it's a moment of connection and light and love. I think that's been just so freeing for me that the world kind of knows my fantasies, my masturbatory habits, all these things. And the response is largely positive. And so that's been just, it takes time to get there, right? It took me a couple of years to get here. But I recommend it to everyone, because your life is just so much more light and fun and free when you're at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do think now I've become the source of a safe space for a lot of friends that now feel very safe coming to me with their sexual questions, concerns, exploits, stories. So I think that's kind of interesting and kind of nice. And it's also like a challenge for me personally. You have these, like, I have friends that I've now known for, close to 20 years that I still see in my regular daily life. And you meet them at a certain stage in your life and you're maybe not that comfortable, and you develop these relationships where you can't really, it's not a relationship where you maybe are that open about your sexuality, even if it's a gay best friend, they maybe don't feel comfortable sharing with you. So shifting over from those patterns that you have created to knowing a person on a more intimate level where they do feel comfortable is kind of been a fun trajectory that this movie kind of facilitated. So I think it's made it so that I've developed more close, meaningful relationships with people. And then one little, I think, little gem I think that I've taken away is I think I was kind of brought up being in the Bay Area, going to UC Berkeley, to be very sexually open, very sex positive, but learning to be kind of sex neutral, because I think being overly positive also creates its own set of maybe problems that were maybe that not that in tune with. Everyone's kind of driven to be a little more open and more positive, but just meeting people where they're at and not challenging them or pushing them and letting people set their own boundaries has kind of been a lesson that I've learned through making this film.
I so agree with you. It makes so much sense because it really goes both ways, right? The toxicity, or not talk about it at all, or being openly very positive, but then maybe it makes you uncomfortable, or you don't feel as like at this stage yet, so maybe you're feeling not as comfortable.
Right.
What do you think is the right line? For instance, if I am a parent, what should I do? Should I talk to my children about sex, or should I wait for them to ask questions at what age is okay? What would be the main takeaway for a parent, for instance, who actually has children growing?
Yeah, I think, the message that we've heard from all the educators is because it's just obvious to kids that sex is like a somewhat dangerous topic to talk about, they will rarely be the people to bring it up first, right? So I think a lot of parents are waiting for their kids to talk about it. But I think it is incumbent on the parent not to, it can be a minute conversation. It's not like grilling your child about their sexuality, but just saying like, oh, I had my period today, and because I had my period, blah, 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 very matter of fact, no, just being comfortable with the words, or, saying like, oh, sorry, if just even using the words erection or penis or vulva, vagina, the actual words, not the hidden cutesy words, that you're actually willing to say these words, talk about them, and how they actually affect your day to day. But then, but don't make a big deal about it. And I think that gives kids a little bit of that opening that maybe they'll for 10 seconds ask a question and they feel like it's safe, and then you slowly, conversation by conversation, slowly, then you can reach that point. And I think, we hope this movie is kind of that, cannot be that bridge for a lot of people too, because sometimes you need like a third party to talk about. You can't talk about the thing, you need to talk about the things that, like, do you remember that movie? Wasn't that funny when he talked about masturbation? And then just, make it very clear that talking about masturbation, if you would want to, is a safe thing to do in this family, and no one's going to get weird about it. So I think it's a step-by-step process. There are great books out there. There are great YouTube videos. There are a lot of great ways you can broach the subject without making it this intense like talk. Because I think that's the problem that a lot of, at least in America, it feels like it's like you need to have the talk at a certain age and then you're done, and then you've had it. But that's just like to me, that's just like a horribly awkward, uncomfortable conversation that no one's really getting anything out of. So yeah, I think, just it's a day-to-day thing for everyone, so just treat it like a day-to-day thing, not positive, not negative. It's just, it is what it is. And I think you'll be surprised at the insights of vulnerability, the intimacy you can get with someone, especially your children.
And I guess my main takeaway was to kind of sum that up is like the silence is a very message that children learn at a very early age. So opening the lines of communication early, and then doing it often, just to make things not weird. I think I'm kind of paraphrasing one of the speakers in the film, but that it's just important to create these open lines of communication so that you don't create a barrier with your children, and ultimately it's for the sake of having a more close relationship and knowing them as a complete person, versus just siloing off these pieces of your humanity and then never crossing that barrier to know anyone on any more deeper, meaningful level.
It's so inspiring and so incredibly important, because obviously the main also goal of your film is probably education and just understanding what's behind sex and what are the main takeaways, so that we stop repeating the same problems. And on the other way around, for not necessarily a child, but just someone who's maybe grown in a community and they didn't really know who to turn to. if they consider the LGBTQIA plus community, or just unfortunately so far they haven't found someone to talk about this topic, what would be your advice? What is the first thing they can do? Attending film festival and talk with you guys, or?
I mean, the beauty of the internet now, right? And is at the very least you can watch a It Gets Better video on YouTube. You can see people who are like you living perfectly meaningful, fulfilling lives. So knowing that you are normal, there's nothing wrong with you, I think is a great first step. And if there's no one in your life who you feel comfortable talking with for various reasons, that is difficult. I don't know where I would be without a good therapist. And I know that's not easy for everyone to have access to. But really doing the research to find someone who will present you kind of like basically what Leo was saying, non-judgmental advice, who will listen non-judgmentally. I think there are a lot of resources out there in which they want to tell you something so you can get to a certain point. But the key is listening non-judgmentally. And I think that's the one big thing I've learned from the movie is that I'm not the best listener, non-judgmental listener, that it's a skill set you have to take. But if you become a good one, you'll be amazed at the people in your life who not only also become non-judgmental listeners, but then you actually get to learn about, because I think there's a lot of people in your life that really want to talk about these things, but are scared to, right? Because they're scared someone's going to judge them. So it takes work. It takes a lot of just mental fortitude, but finding the people in your life who you can provide that ear for, and then they can provide an ear for it, is just so worth it, even if you have to go through a lot of people who maybe aren't there yet. So my advice is, whether you have to move, whether you have to just work hard in your community, work on those listening skills, work on those communication skills, and you'll be amazed at what can come from that.
That is so inspiring, because it just means basically there are solutions, and you don't have to not honor your sexuality or who you are. From my experience, what I can say is that we here at the festival, we are a very open community, and we don't want anyone to behave like someone they're not. We want people to feel happy and just tell their stories. So if you feel not comfortable, please feel free also sometimes to turn to film festivals, or, as Alex said, just someone in your tribe, trying to find a new tribe. So sometimes moving can be an option, just trying to listen and indeed try to maybe find new people you can turn to and build a better life for you, because we all deserve that. No one deserves to be someone different that they're not. Actually, about that, Alex, how was the conversation with your family in the film? How did that go?
Yeah, I think it's actually having my parents watch what we edited was like this horrible, nerve-wracking experience, because it's kind of the most intimate, vulnerable we've been with each other, and then me having to present them to the world, I was just so terrified that they wouldn't understand what I was trying to do. And it's just been so wonderful that they not only understood what I was trying to do with the film, they kind of now understand what I'm trying to do with my career. Because I think when you say documentary filmmaker for parents, especially a child of immigrants, they get a little like, are you sure? Are you going to be able to feed yourself? But they get what I'm trying to do, which has been great. And now the conversations we have, I mean, there's always going to be boundaries with your parents. It's never going to be your best friend. But the conversations we have are so much more lighter, so much more about how we're actually doing. It's been great to hear from other family members who we can laugh about our family dynamic and all that. So it's just been, it's a slow process, but it feels like we're actually moving towards a relationship that feels more connected and bonded in a way that I didn't quite anticipate.
It was really fun to watch those interviews. I felt uncomfortable, and I'm not related, but it was good.
Yeah, there's a great 15-minute cut of that interview that maybe one day we'll show, but there's some great gems that we had to cut. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was priceless, and it's part of your film because it's so easily relatable. You're like, what's gonna happen? It really shows also how much you invested of yourself in your film, right? Like show that everything, all that is being said is really open, and it's a process for everyone, each of us, to actually have that conversation and see where that goes.
Yeah.
Actually quite exciting. So you guys have such a massive success on the festival circuit. For obviously CineQuest, where it Audience Award, massive and so many more festivals, including the one in Switzerland. Am I correct?
Yeah. We showed at the Zurich Film Festival. That was exciting. Yeah.
How amazing. It's so wonderful to see your film traveling, because it will speak so well to an international audience. So this is your French premiere.
Yes.
So it's really exciting. And for everyone who is watching and listening to this, by the way, if you haven't watched a Sexplanation yet, please do. Any time of the day, it's at the bottom right of your screen in the virtual cinema. And if this is before Valentine's Day, make sure to join us for an interactive Q&A with the filmmakers, Alex and Leo. For people who've watched your film, how can they support you? How can they support your film?
Yeah, if you go to sexplanation.com or follow us on any of the social media platforms, at Sexplanation, all one word. We'll be posting there how you can support the film. We have some exciting things coming up this year in terms of how you can see it more broadly in a wider release. So hopefully just follow us there, and you'll get all the news. You'll be the first to learn what's going on with the movie.
Amazing. And aside of the film itself, can we have a little bit of insight on your guys' future goals, or what's next for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we joke that there was like this great queer, kink, trans researchers we couldn't even talk about, so we joke that might be the sequel. There's a great talk about historians about sex, so we're definitely thinking about, what are the little things that we couldn't fit in this narrative around helping you understand, like, why do you have the sexual thoughts, feelings, morality that you do, and are they actually serving you? Is there a different way to think about it, and playing with that? But also, I think we're very interested in broadly just about how do you have difficult conversations about a lot of things in the world that have nothing to do with sex. So yeah, we're kind of exploring all those things and seeing if we can convince more people to sit in front of the camera for us.
I'm sure you really will. Yeah, exactly. And you guys will be working together again?
Yes. I can't imagine doing any other projects without Leo. Yeah.
What a successful collaboration. Massive congratulations to you both on this amazing film. And of course, we are dying to see the next one. How exciting, and more talking about sex sounds really, really good. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much. This is an honor.
Merci beaucoup. And to anyone watching, please feel free also to share this information and bring awareness in your communities. Talking about sex is very important. Well, at the Paris International Film Festival, we are all up for that. So please feel free, watch the film, The Sexplanation, in the virtual cinema, and make sure anytime to connect with the filmmakers, share the website, and also maybe sometimes help someone around you who is more uncomfortable talking about sex. Feel free to have a conversation with them, because that also sometimes helps. Sometimes it's all about the first step. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
À très bientôt.
Bye.